Hello everyone, my name is Charles Chae. I'm a products engineer here at Ikegami Electronics. I'm also here with the Director of Engineering, Mr. Alan Kyle, and today we're going to be showing you the basic functions of our OCP-300, which is currently connected with one of our HDK models at the moment. Let's get it started.
Thanks, Charlie, for the introduction. There are three ways that the OCP-300 can be connected to the camera. It can be connected via direct cabling, which would be an Ikegami CP cable, in effect an RS-422 cable with power from the CCU or base station, or camera head if it's connected directly to the head. However, more commonly these days people are using network connections. Originally we had introduced an ArcNet system, but almost everyone these days is using an Ethernet system. I'm not going to go into too much detail on that. We're assuming that the OCP is installed and that the cabling is done and the switch at the back of the OCP is set correctly. If it's a direct connection, there's nothing to do except to press the enable button. In fact, it may already be pressed as it is now. If it's an Ethernet connection, we may have to assign the OCP, and that would be done by pushing OCP set above the LCD screen, assign, then we would hit base station. Looks like I cannot do that right now because we are directly connected, but if we were in Ethernet, we would have a BS button to press, and then we would load the appropriate IP address. But again, let's assume for the moment that we are connected, and let's deal with the operation of the control panel. The lower two-thirds of the panel are essentially direct access to the operational controls. I would also mention that the top couple of rows of buttons or of switches are also direct operational control. Most of them are self-explanatory and are easy enough to identify by the labeling, but I want to talk about a few that are a little bit unique and might not be as self-explanatory as we might wish they were. Knob-free is one such switch. Knob-free, we're moving it into position here. Knob-free, when I push and hold that, allows me to reposition one of the variable resistor type controls, such as the PEDs and gains, without making any change to the camera. Right now everything's at 12 o'clock and that's all well and good. But if I did, for example, a black balance and I did not center my potentiometers, by mistake I guess, and we come back and we see that they're pointed at arbitrary directions, and yet the camera is black balanced, and I would prefer that the black levels were at 12 o'clock, having achieved a proper black balance. Then I would push and hold knob free and turn the appropriate VR. While doing so, no change occurs to the camera. So we're just repositioning the potentiometers. There is a joystick enable switch added to the OCP that did not exist on earlier Ikegami OCPs. It does have to be enabled for the joystick to operate. We have this switch on the MCPs, but it's been added now to the OCP as well. Default should be enabled, but I mention it just in case you find that the joystick is not operational. You can use that. Full and relative are also can be important switches for the operation of the joystick. If we're in network configuration, there is the possibility that another panel in a different location, maybe an MCP, maybe just a duplicate OCP assigned to the same camera, might be adjusting the iris, and the joystick position may not match the physical position of the iris of the lens. That being the case, the full light and the relative light will blink, and to re-achieve full and calibrated range between the physical joystick and the physical iris, I will push the full button. When I do that, the iris will move to the actual position of this particular joystick. There are a couple of LEDs up here that normally would be off, such as they are today, but I mention them because they can reassign these potentiometers. If the master LED is illuminated next to the green gain control, that would indicate that the green gain has been reassigned to do all three colored channels simultaneously and equally, just as a master would. And similarly, if the flare is illuminated down below the black level adjustments, it means that instead of being RGB black, these are RGB flares. And if the master is also illuminated, it means that this would be, the green would be a master flare instead of a green flare. So normally not illuminated, but if illuminated, pay attention to the meaning of that LED. We do have the up-down switches here. This is kind of the first default page where I have control of my two filter wheels, so-called ND wheel and color corrective filter wheels. Most of our cameras do have dual filter wheels. Those that do not, we probably control the color temperature electronically using the same up-down switches. And the third is the gain. These can be assigned to other functions. So there is an up-down feature located here, where I can select and reassign the up-down to be gamma and black stretch, black press. And a third page that's available is up-down selection of the auto white balance memory. And then I go around and back to the control of the filter wheel. So be aware of the assignment capability there. We also have some F switches. These are assignable switches, switches and potentiometers. So adjacent to the painting controls, I do have two assignable potentiometers. Typical default might be knee, point, and slope, or overall detail and skin detail. If I look at the LCD screen, it will tell me the assignment. Had to look somewhat quickly. Touch it, it will display what the potentiometers are assigned to do and the corresponding values of those functions. I didn't read it quick enough, but right now it is assigned to the knee, point, and slope adjustments. And then there are a few switches, 3 switches in fact, F switches above the LCD screen, and finally an F switch at the bottom of the OCP panel. So these are assignable switches. Oftentimes we use the F4 switch to work in conjunction with an option to share the OCP. We do have shared capability on an OCP. When I push that, it will display a 10 keypad touch panel, so I can reassign the panel pretty rapidly, the OCP, to up to 10 cameras. One final highlight here, reviewing these switches, go all the way back to the top, and that is this somewhat cryptic abbreviation here, PM/IND. Actually, there's no slash there, so it's just PM-IND. And this switch is used to control the picture monitor character display. There are 4 pages of character right now available on the picture monitor output. This is obviously not an airable signal. This is strictly for local monitoring by the engineers and operators. So With it extinguished, it's actually a clean screen. There is no character display on the picture monitor output. Page 1 will show us the ID. If we want to program an identification, it looks like it's not programmed at this instant in time. I'll carry on. Page 2 will be my diagnostic page, showing me the diagnostic status of the head on the left and the CCU on the right. There would be an alarm light on the OCP if there was a reason that we should be looking at this page, but we can always review it. Page 3 would be my auto setup. This will display itself automatically when I'm running a setup routine, and at any time I can call it up and see what the last routine was. It did an auto setup and it ran okay. And finally, I have scene files. The 8 scene files can be titled. Right now it's showing that scene file number 5 is on. You see the highlight there on the 5, but we don't have titles programmed. So we better have notes or memory as to what the scene file is doing. But titling it can be nice. Takes a little less of our brain power to memorize what the scene files are. Hit it one more time, and we go around to the clean display on the picture monitor output. So that's the basic rundown. I haven't gone through the controls that I consider self-explanatory. We'll leave those for now, and I'll move to the LCD screen. When we push the operate button, we get what we would consider the default page, showing supplemental operational controls that are available with each camera model. So this is adding electronic color temperature, some detail control, shutter control, knee and black stretch type controls. There are 3 pages. I use the arrow here in the upper right to select between the 3 standard pages. Calling them up, I think you'll see they're pretty self-explanatory. The function on-off with the keypads or touchpads, and the value controllable by the rotary encoders below that. So 3 pages of supplemental operational control. Now the LCD screen and the rotary encoders are also used for in-depth fine-tuning of the camera. I can show you a quick glimpse of that, although we're going to leave that subject to a separate and second video for you guys. But if I hit setup, and then I will have 2 pages, for example, showing the main chapters of setup. And just for a quick look, if I were to hit video and gamma, for example, I would see my RGB gamma adjustments, available black and step gamma settings, some on-off capability if I am going into a setup mode and want to disable some functions while adjusting the gamma. That's just a taste of what's available there. So basically we have the operational settings, a few user particular settings that you decide you want quick access to, the overall setup. OCP setup refers strictly to adjusting the OCP itself. And then I have 3 more F switches. We can see what they're currently assigned for. Number 1 shows the waveform and picture monitor control. Number 2 is direct access for the filter wheels. If I don't like the up-down, I want to go right to position E on the CC filter. I can do it with 1 click. And finally F4, well, I'm not sure what it's doing. I'd have to look in the OCP setup under customize to see what's happening there. Scene files, I want to talk about scene files. We said we're leaving the in-depth setup for later. Scene file selection, we have 8 scene files in essentially all of our cameras, controlled by the OCP, but bear in mind that they're not memorized per se in the OCP. The OCP is causing the camera head or the base station to recall the file. And in most cases, we're really talking about this memory being in the head. The storage of the scene file will take place in the location where the function occurs. So if it's a gamma adjustment and gamma is done by the video processing in the camera head, then it will be stored in the camera head. So 8 scene files. This case, on-off is simple as pressing the button. However, I should pay attention to the arrow because I've only got the 4 push buttons, so I've got to select with my shift guy here if I'm dealing with scene files 1 through 4 or 5 through 8. So I was in number 5 before. To store a scene file, I simply push store and select the appropriate number, once again paying attention to the shift and the arrow key. So 8 scene files available at any given time. Again, when we talk about the more in-depth settings, we can access the memory card position, which allows us to expand the quantity of scene files essentially indefinitely. They're not that big, and on a memory card you can store literally thousands of files. At which point we better start titling them because we won't otherwise know what they are. Let's have a look at let's talk for a moment about daily setup. Normally, if a camera has been adjusted the day before, or it's generally set up okay, then the adjustment procedure is really quite simple. We would recommend centering the VRs, the painting controls that is, or potentiometers. I would also center the joystick. You can see the joystick has a pointer as when I turn it here, so I would put that at 12 o'clock as well. Iris, not particularly concerned about. At that point, we would run an ABB, upper right switch, auto black balance. There's no prerequisite for running an auto black balance. The camera will take care of it by either closing, whoa, didn't have it positioned. So ABB up here, underneath the enable button. No prerequisite, except some cameras, many cameras these days use the iris, closing the iris to cap the camera for black balance. So they have to have a lens with a working iris to achieve that. But that's essentially it. Process takes a few seconds. If we were looking on the picture monitor, we would get a report of it. We do kind of expect to see a setting such as this, 2% on the master ped adjustment. That's the Ikegami U.S.A. kind of standard for where the black balance level is set upon completion of the auto black balance process. When it's practical, of course, we would recommend an auto white balance. And that's adjacent to the auto black balance. I didn't mention it at the onset, but it would be good to allow the camera to warm up for a few minutes before starting this procedure if we were in a fresh start situation. There is some, cameras are pretty stable these days, but there's still some stability with the dark current of the imagers that would benefit from a short warm-up period of a few minutes. A couple minutes would be okay, but if you have the time to give it 5-10 minutes or even a little longer for a warm-up, that's probably preferable. Auto white balance. The prerequisite is to have, of course, a proper white in the scene or the shot. It doesn't have to be all of the picture or even a large area. It can be a fairly modest 2 or 3 or 4 or 5% of the picture, but it does need to be the brightest object. The white needs to be the brightest object. If I'm getting a specular off of a chrome or similar object in the scene, that can disrupt the auto white. It also needs to be in the center 80% of the picture. It can't be at the very edge. It needs to be somewhat central, not dead center, but somewhat central. Given that prerequisite, then I can just push the auto white balance. Let's see how we do here today. I think we have the criteria that we need, and it will run through the process and give us a report. If the process were unsuccessful, the ABB, or in this case the AWB, switch would continue to blink, indicating a problem. I push the button again to dismiss the warning message, then I should correct whatever caused the issue and do it again. Now, if it's the first time that you're working with these cameras, maybe you've just been hired to set up these cameras. That being the case, of course, we do the traditional, probably do the traditional back focus on the lens, especially if the lenses have been reassigned to different cameras. That follows the standard procedure of checking the back focus. Iris fully open for that is always recommended, as you know. And then we can do what I recommend then doing, if possible, is to load a snapshot file via the memory card. Hopefully people would have their own snapshot files, but you can also download the snapshot file from Ikegami. They are model dependent, but otherwise they can be shared. So they're not individual camera dependent, they're model dependent. So if I were to have, I'm looking to see what we have here to get, an HDK 95C, I can call up that camera. To some extent, the base station may play a role, but most cameras have the complete processing in the camera head, and therefore it's really head dependent, not base station or CCU dependent. But loading a snapshot file can be recommended. It will set all of the parameters in a good position. Some subjective parameters, such as detail, would be best, as I said, if you had your own snapshot file, so that you could adjust the amount of detail that you like to operate with. Again, you can load it across the board for the different cameras. They track well, typically. And then I would proceed with the daily setup of auto black and auto white balance. I think that completes what our goal is today. So I'm going to turn the microphone back to Charlie, and he will wrap it up for us. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you for that demonstration, Mr. Kyle, of our OCP-300. If you have any further questions, please refer to our OCP-300 operation manual, or feel free to contact us from the information provided on the screen. Thank you for watching. Take care.